We want to keep the evenings as family time. We want to keep the evenings to create a wonderful atmosphere for us as a family. That's an important thing to remember. And I would say a great application of this is husbands, when you come home, before you walk through the door, I would say you need to ask the Lord to give you joy and give you strength and give you peace and energy and strength and happiness for the people that are beyond that door there. Don't keep all the smiles for the colleagues in the office. They won't care too much about you when you leave that office one day. But remember that the ones who really love you, the ones you're going to build a lifelong relationship, are beyond that door. So don't come back grumpy. And don't use tiredness as an excuse for carnality. But you allow the Holy Spirit to quicken you. And as wives, if you're home earlier, get spruced up and just be ready to greet your husband at the door and keep things ready as much as you can so that you have a happy evening together. It's very simple. But so much, 90% of problems can be avoided if we just were a little sensitive to the fact that we've had a long day. And you can be tired, but you can be tired and still be loving. Amen? Right? Can you be tired and still loving? Yes, you can. You can be exhausted, but you can still be very loving. And that's the first reason, and I was thinking about that. It's a very simple solution. Sensitivity. Creating a wonderful atmosphere. That's a good reason. Here's a second reason why couples will have a disagreement, and I call it the middle stuff. The middle stuff. And number two, this is when we cross the line of respect or cross the line of honor for each other. Now imagine if I was in the office and I was late in the office and my wife had made it very clear that evening, here we were going to have a very special evening with a special dinner, family time, and she took all the trouble to cook. And I remember that. She called me, she SMS'd me, she gave me many reminders. But imagine if I was in the office and I never picked up the phone. She's saying, don't forget, we need you back at 7, 8 o'clock. We got a special dinner. Today is a special day with our son. And I never picked up the phone. And I never SMS'd back. And then I show up at 10 o'clock in the night. And they've all had to eat. They didn't know where I was. The food is in the fridge. I come home, and I don't even talk to anyone much, or I say, well, I'm just busy. I would be very insensitive. And she would be very justified to be hurt with my insensitivity. Because in marriage, we have to have loving consideration for each other. I love watching from the office, so Atul and Deepa will call each other, and I will call my wife, and Kishore will call his wife. Why do we do that? Why does loving couples do that in a home? Because we want to communicate what's our next plan. We want to say, I'll be home late today. It's just a very simple part of being considerate for one another as a couple. Put yourself on the other side. What if Sue was out and we had an appointment at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and she was out with one of the girls in a cafe day sipping coffee. She hardly does that, by the way. And she knew we had an appointment at 2 and I was trying to call her. And she said, yeah, I'm coming. But then she came at 3 o'clock. We'd be crossing a line of honor for each other. It'd be very easy for us to express our disappointment because we had certain commitments to keep. So you must remember that your spouse in marriage, there's a line of honor and respect. It's a very simple thing. But marriage requires that kind of loving commitment, that loving consideration. And one of the things oftentimes that couples miss is they take each other for granted. It just leads to a fact of like, you don't respect me, you don't honor that I was waiting for you and I planned this whole thing for you. Oh, we blow it once in a while. But it should not be our norm. It should be something that we're thinking about often, about people we care about. Now, there's a third area where disagreements or confrontation And this is the most serious one. It's a larger area. It's a larger, I would talk about it in areas where there is a need for confronting. But I like to use a different word than confronting. The word confronting is too strong. I love the word carefronting. Do you remember I shared that with you once? Carefronting. You care about somebody, so you speak to them in love. Now let me explain how this works in a marriage. If you have larger issues. Let's say your husband, God forbid, had started to get into getting on the net and getting into sites that were terribly bad. Pornography. God forbid that happened. Now that would not be a very healthy thing at all for him. That would never be good for your marriage. And I'm going to speak about that in one of the messages soon. What chemical attractions happen and how people get addicted to internet sites and pornography and how devastating it is for a wife to find that out. It just ruins her as if she's not good enough for you. And don't you ever get into that thing. But imagine if the wife found out that that was happening. Well, she couldn't be silent about it. She would have to speak to her husband and speak the truth in love. What if he came home drunk every night and created a problem? She would have to speak the truth in love. I had a person that I know very well, and he got married. He got married through internet website, and he married a girl that he met on the website. He knew the girl for 3 months. She had been married and divorced. She had 3 kids. He was a little guy. She was a very big-made girl. That's not the problem. The problem is he didn't even get to know her. After they got married, they had their own children, and she found out that this girl, God bless her, she came from a Christian home, but her parents broke up, and she had great needs in her life. And one of the ways that she had recreation was spending money. She was not a little spender. She would go to her electronic store, she would go to her furniture mall, and even if she didn't need anything, she would just buy things. 4 kids. Within the 6 months of their marriage, she rang up a bill of $40,000 to her. And she didn't think anything about it. She just thought, if you love me, I'm just buying it for our home. $40,000. At first he thought it was just a mistake. Then he realized that she had a problem. She was a compulsive buyer. She just had to buy. Eventually they ended up having to go for counseling. But you see, there's an issue here that is severe. It is a problem. We have a financial problem that's causing unbelievable stress in our home. The interest rates on the credit that was taken on the credit card was unbelievable. And he's spending all his time working to pay off the debt now. A problem. Now, I want to consider something. When you get married, you are committed also to the growth of your husband and your wife. That's what marriage does. 2 friends getting together, and you know what? Because you're friends, you can't leave each other in problems like that. And so good marriages will try to move in such a way that we're going to try and see how these areas can change. And when you have to cause somebody to change in an area, there's going to be a conflict, there's going to be a problem, there's going to be a disagreement. But those are good disagreements. Because in every conflict, there are times when there are weak points in somebody's life which need to be changed. Now, please be careful. I want to say something. You cannot change your husband. We are teaching that in the counseling class. You cannot, the wife cannot change the husband, and the husband cannot change the wife. What you can do is you can inspire them and influence them by your love, by your kindness, by your words, by coming alongside to help them, recognizing that you are part of the solution with them, and you'll work it through with them if they're willing to change. So many times, husbands and wives can influence each other over a period of time. So if you're in a situation which is very difficult, Don't give up. Don't throw up your hands and say, oh, I don't think anything's going to happen in this marriage. Our marriage is over. No, you married somebody. Maybe they have some problems in their lives, some blind spots. Maybe God will use you to change them, and maybe they will have a great marriage, and they will be happy that they changed. But here comes the communication thing. And I love this verse, and we're going to go now to a verse in the Bible, and it's one of the best verses you can ever think of biblical wisdom. Okay, let's turn to Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 25. We'll read from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25 to 32. And I want you to just really put this down as the verse, the key verse for learning communication, not just in communicating with your husband in disagreement, but also in communicating with anybody, any relationship. It's a great verse. Paul is writing this verse. If you turn to chapter 1, you'll come to Ephesians chapter 5, where Paul is talking about this amazing principle of love, the marriage bond of love. He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, Ephesians 5:25. And wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. You know, the husband is the head of the wife. And he goes on to this whole beautiful thing that we should love each other because we're members of one another's body, right? So we're going to help each other. But before he comes to Ephesians chapter 5, watch how Paul is addressing an important part of communication in Ephesians chapter 4. Great relationships. Watch this. Now, we're going to just go from a few verses before we come to practical stuff. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25. Listen. Therefore, laying aside falsehood, or in one translation says, if there be any falsehood, let us speak the truth to one another. Let's use the word instead of neighbor. Speak the truth to your mate. If there is any falsehood, let us speak the truth to your mate. Let's say that together. Let us what? Speak the truth to your mate. Ephesians verse 4:15 says, speak the truth in love. Why? Because we are members of one another. That's the first principle. That you don't sweep things under the carpet. You don't get bitter and just get all worked up about it and don't confront. There's a time when you need to speak the truth to your mate, where there are major issues or minor issues. You need to speak the truth to them in love. Okay? That's the first principle. Number 2, listen to this one. The next verse says, be angry, but do not sin. What does that mean? Be angry, but do not sin. Well, if your husband or your wife, if your husband's into some looking and watching some stuff that he shouldn't be watching, if your husband's into verbally abusing your kids and calling them all kinds of names all the time, if your husband is into, or your wife is into financial, spending or unkind with the words, guess what? You're going to be hurt. You're going to be disappointed. In fact, you might be very angry. Anger is an emotion given by God. And by the way, anger is not always sinful. That's why he says, be angry, yet do not sin. Now let me just tell you something. Jesus was angry. There was twice in the scriptures where Jesus actually was so upset because the Jewish leaders had taken the temple, a sacred place of prayer, and made it a place for money changers. And he was so upset in the court of the Gentiles because he said, the Gentiles are not important. As long as the Jewish house is okay, the Gentiles are not important. Jesus was, no, my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, for all Gentile peoples. It's for the whole world. My house is a house of prayer. Don't you ever say that. And Jesus was upset with the money changers. And he took a whip, and he made a call, and he just overturned the changers, and he said, out, out, out. And he told them why he were out. He was upset. But that was a righteous anger. Zeal for God's house had consumed him. It was a righteous anger. For example, if you saw a child being molested on the street, somebody was out there, and you were angry, that would be a righteous anger. God gave you emotions of anger. Sometimes to say, what my husband's doing is not right. That's not right. It'll hurt our children. Or it'll hurt his own life. That's not right. You're angry about it. To have anger is not a problem, but to have anger in the right way is important. If I lose my temper,